Well, thank you for coming this morning. I know it's a long weekend, lots of people are away, but you are here, and that is a good thing. And we're here this morning as well. As you can see, actually, I was not supposed to be here, but I made it. We were supposed to be on our way to a conference, and that's where Pastor Ken is actually right now. He's in the car, driving down to New York with his wife, John Bolt, and Danielle Bolt as well. And I am just excited to hear about the experience driving down because I know how John can be. He loves loud music. And Pastor Ken likes loud music too, doesn't he, Fred? He has to. So they're on their way. We're actually going to be on our way as well, my wife and I, this evening with Andrea. So we decided to do a little bit of stripped down version for the worship. It's so nice to have all the noise removed and just tenderly enter the presence of God. Amen? It's just one of the nicest things that we can do. And we had a wedding yesterday. It was really wild in here. Can I just put it that way? This whole place was turned into a wedding reception. We had a ceremony, and then they flipped it into a wedding reception. So Joel and Kathy got married yesterday, the young couple from our church. And they're actually right about now, they're down in Mexico. And they are enjoying their time, I'm sure. And it's nice and hot down there, so, I told them to bring some of that. We're missing that today. Next week, they're saying it's going to get hotter, so they're going to bring it with them. But we had a lot of different people come in yesterday. A lot of people from East Coast, so Joel's and Larry's family. That's why Larry's not here. He's probably... He's not hungover. We had no alcohol. But he just, with the family, there's a lot of family that came to visit, and they were just... and I was thinking to myself yesterday, we had a dance floor out in the foyer. There was a DJ, music playing, and I was just thinking to myself, like, these people from East Coast are better dancers than us here down in Kitchener, Waterloo area. Plus, there were Spanish people there, so that was a good mix. A lot of Spanish, South American people that dance really good as well. So that was a good mix yesterday. I was busting the moves. If you were not here, I feel sorry for you. It was actually a really good time. We had a wonderful time. But this morning we have a guest speaker. And for those of you that don't know Fred is a really good friend of Pastor Ken. They go way back, long time. And I would say Fred is probably the person that kept Pastor Ken straight. On his path, all of his ministry, 43 years of ministry. And there's always good stories, and Fred has so many stories. They're going to stay forever. We're recording all this stuff, just so you know. So we were just talking with the media team this morning, when we're gone one day, YouTube is going to prevail. And all the stuff we've done for YouTube and our websites are going to be online. So these messages are going to stay forever. We're excited. So why don't we just give a warm welcome to Fred as he comes and shares the word with us.
Well, thank you very much, David. It is always an honor and a joy to come and be here in Kitchener and to just have an opportunity to minister in this church. As David said, Ken and I go back quite a long ways. This March past, we sort of celebrated 50 years of friendship together. And we were just kids when we met, teenagers basically, and time has gone by. But there are many stories. And I'm aware of modern technology, so I filter the stories now because some of them should not be preserved for posterity. Some of them are best forgotten and left where they belong in the distant past. But I'm happy to be here, as I said, and when Ken called me a few weeks ago, I can always tell before he even gets to the point, of why he called, what he's calling about, because there's always a little desperate edge in his voice. When he calls me. And so he proceeded to tell me a few weeks ago that he was going to a conference in New York this weekend and that, some of his ministry team would be going with him. So, would I come and be here today? So here I am. And like David said, I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm here because everyone else is not. This morning at the first service, I said, I'm not really the first string pastor. I'm not even the second string or the third string. I'm not even a draftee. What I am is an old retired pastor pulled out of retirement and thrust into the role this morning. So, but it's great to be here and to be able to share what I think is the word of the Lord for today. Let me ask you a question as we begin this morning, though, and you don't have to raise your hands or anything, but just sort of in your own mind. And I suspect I know what the answer is for most of you and perhaps even all of you here today. But the question I want to pose to you is this: have you ever worried? Have you ever worried? Like I said, you don't have to raise your hands, but if I did ask you to, like I said, it would not surprise me to see the vast majority of you raise your hands. There's always a few, that are either indifferent, don't like to participate, or they're deluded, or they're just simply too young and carefree in life that they don't even, regard the stresses of life as much of a challenge. But most of us do worry. Most of us have worried. And what I thought I would do is just let you know that there's really, scientists have discovered a reason why you worry. It's a scientific sort of research has been done to kind of put it into perspective as to why human beings worry. So I'm going to kind of give you some science here for just a few moments before we get into the scriptures so that you understand that, it's not abnormal to worry. What is abnormal is if you let that worry somehow impact your life in a negative way. But to have worry is not abnormal, because here's the reason for it. I want you to take just a moment now to kind of, in your minds, pretend with me that you're a giraffe. Can you do that? I mean, I know some of us as we get older, our imagination kind of dwindles a bit and we're really challenged to imagine. But just really work hard at this if you're in that category. Pretend just for a few moments that you're a giraffe and you're living in an African savanna land. Okay, so you live on the grasslands of an African savanna and you have a neck on you that is 7 feet long, and every now and then you spot a group of human beings driving around on a safari taking pictures of you. Okay? But it's not just your neck and their cameras that separate you from the humans. Perhaps the biggest difference between you and your giraffe friends and the humans taking your picture is that, and listen to this now, nearly every decision you make as a giraffe provides an immediate benefit to your life. For example, you start to feel hungry. What do? You just kind of wander over to a tree and you start nibbling on the leaves. And you start satisfying that anger, or that hunger rather. If a storm starts to roll in and you see the clouds starting to gather, what do you do as a giraffe? Well, you just get out of the open area, you just go find a bush that you can crawl under and slouch under, and you take shelter. Or if you spot a lion stalking you on the peripheral of the field, and you know he's coming for you, what do you do as a giraffe? Well, you just simply use your long legs and you run away. Animals are incredible. They think like that. They live in the moment. They think in the present, and they deal with their present as they find it. Now, on any given day, most of your choices as a giraffe, like what you eat or where to sleep or when to avoid a predator, that moment makes an immediate impact on your life. And researchers have a name for it. They call this the immediate return environment. And that's where most animals live. They live in an environment called immediate return. For example, if you've ever seen a deer, they can be spooked by your presence and they'll run off because they feel anxiety over you being there. They don't know your intention and they fear harm. And so they run off. But moments after they've distanced themselves from you, if you look through your field glasses at that deer again, the deer is completely relaxed, back to chewing grass, enjoying the sunshine. Because they live in the immediate. They live in the moment. There is an immediate return environment. Now, let's kind of flip you back to normal again. You're now a human being, not a giraffe anymore. So You don't have to pretend anymore, right? I hope. So you're one of the human beings vacationing on the safari. And unlike the giraffes, though, you don't live in the immediate return environment. You see, human beings are different than the animal world. And here's how. You, as a human, live in what is described as the delayed return environment. The delayed return environment. Now, most of the choices you will make, usually you do not benefit from those choices right now. For example, if you did a good job at work on Monday morning, then you don't expect the boss to come, show up at 5 o'clock and hand you some cash. You know that you're not going to get paid until Friday. So you do your work today, and you expect your reward at the end of the week. That's the delayed return environment. That's where we live as human beings. So this is also true of our problems, not just our work environment, but of our problems as well. While a giraffe is worried about the immediate problems, i.e. being hungry, avoiding storms, or avoiding lions, many of the problems that humans worry about are problems of the future. What if I do this? What if that doesn't work out? What if that goal is not reached? For example, you may think, I'm here on vacation. This is really nice, but I got to go back to work next week. But should I go back to work next week? Should I change jobs? Is this the right moment for a career move? I don't know. And then you start to stew over that, and you think, well, I don't want to do what I'm doing forever. I want to do something else eventually. When do I do it? When do I pull the trigger and move on? Jesus himself, I think, understood what scientists are now discovering about us as people. That because we live in this delayed return environment, he had some words for us, words of insight, words of wisdom, words that will help us engage our lives properly. And so in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 25 to 34, he said to the people that were listening to him, we refer to it as part of the Sermon on the Mount. He said, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat or drink, or about your body, what you shall wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They don't labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow. See, Jesus knew what we were like, and he said, don't live that way. Don't worry about things that are in the future somewhere. The early church used to meet in a different structure, in a different setting than how we meet today. Like, we meet in a beautiful building, great, modern technology, instruments, great singers. We have wonderful services together like this in a very comfortable setting. The early church didn't meet like this. They came together often in homes. You ever wonder what a church service in the early church was like? I kind of have imagined that. And I think it's a bit like they came together, and the leaders who were the speakers, the teachers, the ones that sort of talked to the group. I think what their main occupation was relaying to that group of people the things that they remembered that Jesus had taught them, or the things that they had heard Jesus say. And so over in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, after reading Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 34, Peter succinctly captures what Jesus said in Matthew's gospel in the Sermon on the Mount in one very concise statement. And he says to the people who are reading his epistle, and I'm sure he probably used that same message in speaking to the early church gatherings whenever he visited a home and they talked about the Lord. He said to them, "Cast all your anxiety on him." Why? Because he cares for you. That's the essence of what Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about your future. Don't worry about things that are in your tomorrows. But rather, let your anxiety be given up to God because he cares about you. You know, some of the most simplest things are the hardest things to believe. That is so simple. Don't worry because God cares about you. You say, is it really that easy? I found that not only are the simple things hard to believe, they're actually difficult to walk out and live out. But nevertheless, they're true. You know, the old Pentecostals used to have a hymn that they sang, and I can say, I call them the old Pentecostals, but I really shouldn't because I was part of them. And so by indirect association, I'm calling myself old here. I need to be really careful because we don't want to get old, do we? I tell you what, folks, I keep moving the age of the threshold of oldness higher and higher. The older I get, you know, when I was just a young guy, I thought, well, 40 is old. Anybody over 40 is really old. I got to 40 one day and decided, that's not old. So then I made it 60. I got to 60 and I thought, 60's not old. So now I've really gone and I've pushed it all the way now. I'm at the centennial mark. I moved it up to 100. And if I get there, I'll probably be rethinking that number then too. But here's what the Pentecostals used to sing in church. It was a song entitled Many Things About Tomorrow. They sing, I don't know about tomorrow. I just live from day to day. I don't borrow from its sunshine, for its skies may turn to gray. I don't worry o'er the future, for I know what Jesus said. And today, I'll walk beside him, for he knows what is ahead. Then the chorus was, many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know he holds my hand. People used to get blessed singing that song because in essence what it was telling them is, don't worry. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't let that scientific fact dominate your life, impact your life in any kind of negative way. Don't worry. In Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 to 9, God came to Joshua and he had some news for him. It was kind of like, I've got bad news and I've got good news. Which do you want to hear first? You ever had anybody come to you like that? I've got good news and I've got bad news for you. What do you want to hear first? And so God made the decision and said, Joshua, I'm going to give you the bad news first. And so he said, Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, why was that such bad news? Because of who Moses was. He was the leader in Israel. He had led that nation for decades. He was the man that went and stood before Pharaoh when they were Hebrew slaves building pyramids in Egypt. And he was the one that God used to bring them out of slavery and set them on the course towards the promised land. He was the one that led them to the shores of the Red Sea. And when they felt the threat of the pursuing Egyptian army, Moses was the man that heard from God how to escape the Egyptian fury. He was the one that held his rod over the waters, and God parted the Red Sea, and Israel went through on dry land. He was the one that put his rod back over the waters again and brought the waves back together and crushed the Egyptian army and washed them away so that they saw them no more. Moses was a great leader. He was the man that when they had issues and they needed resolution for their arguments and their solving of their problems, they came to Moses and he gave them counsel, he gave them wisdom, he gave them instructions. Moses was a wonderful man. And now the news is he's dead. He is no more. You're leaderless. You don't have him around. He's not going to do any of those things for you anymore. So you can see that when you get bad news like that, it causes just a little bit of anxiety. Any kind of a traumatic change, almost guaranteed, brings anxiety. Almost guaranteed. I say, because there's always some people that can weather any kind of storm. But most of us, when we get bad news, it's upsetting. And it causes some anxious moments. Now, then God said, but I've got good news. And the good news is, you and all these people can get ready and cross over Jordan. Hallelujah. This is what we've been looking forward to. But here's the kicker. Do you know that there's even times when good news is stressful? It's not just bad news that causes anxiety. Sometimes good news causes anxiety. You know, you're at work and the boss comes in and he says, I've got good news and I've got bad news for you. You say, oh, what now? And he says, well, the bad news is that our vice president of sales, Joe, is dead. Joe's dead? Yeah, Joe's dead, but he's the guy that built the sales department. He's the guy that motivates the salesman. He's the guy that gives those great speeches. He's the guy that gets the sales going up, the chart going higher and higher. And he's dead? Yeah, he's dead. He's not coming back to work. But the good news is you're promoted. You're the new vice president of sales. Me? I've got to fill those shoes. I've got to take over Joe's responsibilities. You see, that's good news. It means more money, but it's still, there's more demand on me now. I've got more responsibility. I'm carrying more weight. You see, even in Joshua's time, the bad news was Moses is dead. The good news was you're going across the river. You're going to finally go into the land that I've been promising you. Now, today, at this moment, I got to pack. I don't even know where the kids are. They're somewhere in the camp. I got to find them. Oh, man, I got a lot to do to get ready for this. You know, anxiety comes in many shapes and forms. It's not just bad. It's good sometimes that brings these anxious moments. But God had something to say to Joshua. And here's the thing that I want us to remember. When we find ourselves anxious, whether the cause is bad news or good news, here's the thing we need to remember. The very same thing that God told Joshua. He said, remember two things when you go. Number one, remember my promise. You know what the promise was? Wherever you put your foot, I've given you that land. I'm with you. As I was with Moses, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to go before you. I'm going to make a way. Remember the promise. You see, we have a promise to remember today. Jesus said it. Don't worry because God cares about you. That's his promise to us. He promised to care about us. We've been singing it in the songs here just a few moments ago. How much he's a good father. How much he loves us. That's who he is. And who we are the recipients of that love. Remember my promise and remember my instructions. Just do the things I tell you to do. obey me, and everything will be fine. You know, when Joshua went over to Canaan, I think really God helped him develop 3 principles upon which he could base every decision and every action that he was about to take. The 3 things that Joshua had to lean on, I think, are the 3 things that you and I can lean on today. The first was, there really is no practical alternative to optimism. You know, when you look at a problem, you can look at it in 2 ways. You can look at it and say, well, that's interesting. I wonder how that will turn out. Or you can look at it and say, oh man, how am I ever going to do that? You see the difference? One says, hey, this is interesting. There might be something to this. There might be an opportunity here that I've never had before. Or you can just simply say, oh, this is scary. This could overwhelm me and blow me away. And so when you weigh those 2 options, which is the better one? I kind of think optimism is the best alternative. To approach it with a positive mindset. See, Joshua had to go over that. Yeah, he knew. He'd heard, he'd seen, he had the reports, you know, from the spies. There's cities over there, they're huge. There's giants over there, they're big. There's armies over there, they're strong. You know, all the reports came back telling them about what they were going to face on the other side. But then he thought, but, you know, God's done some pretty big things for us already. After all, he did part the Red Sea. He got us out of Egypt. He crushed the Egyptian army. He took care of us for the last 40 years. You know, who do I go with here? Do I go with the strength of the enemy, or do I go with the strength of my God? And so Joshua chose to be optimistic about moving forward into the land of Canaan. You know, someone came to Winston Churchill during the Second World War, and things were not going well for Britain during that time. I mean, the enemy had overrun most of Europe, and now they were plotting as to how they could cross the Channel and conquer Britain as well. And so someone came to him and asked him about how he was thinking and feeling about the course of the war so far. And so Winston Churchill thought for a few moments, and then he made this statement to the man. He said, I'm feeling optimistic because it doesn't seem to be much use to be anything else. So I'm feeling optimistic about it because what else is there really to feel? I want to encourage you to be optimistic about your life, optimistic about your future, optimistic about the possibilities and the doors that are going to open that you don't even know anything about right now. See, at that point in time when Winston Churchill made that statement, he didn't know about D-Day. He didn't know about, you know, how the Allied armies would eventually push back the enemy and end the war. He didn't know all of that, but he said, I'm optimistic. I think this is going to work out somehow. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know through what means, but I think I'd rather feel this way than any other way. And I think that's a good attitude to walk through life with. So what does an optimistic person actually look like? Here's some things to consider. An optimistic person is simply a person who possesses faith. You believe in something. That's what it means. You just believe in something. You know, we have a record at home. I told him in the first service this morning, you know, it shows you my age. I have records. Yeah. I mean, you know, younger people say, oh, what? What's a record? You know, it sounds like I'm a criminal. I'm not a criminal, but, you know, it plays music. That's what records do. They play music. You know, I know kids say, well, we have thumb drives and CDs like this. I don't know how to drive my thumb. I've driven my thumb with a hammer, but that's another story. But, you know, they have thumb drives and iPods and iPads and discs. And all. One good thing I tell kids nowadays is you may have a lot of CDs, but I have records, and mine are already antiques. Yours are going to have to wait a while. But what does an optimistic look like? Well, an optimist just simply has a belief in something. So the record I have at home is a record by the Wootons. They're a gospel singing group from the 60s. And they used to sing a song, and the words went like this: I've got confidence. God is going to see me through. And I've always liked listening to that song because it had such an upbeat message to it. It had a positiveness to it. It was the voice of an optimistic person. I've got confidence that God is going to see me through. You know, I think as Christians, if anybody should be able to carry that message with them in life, it should be us. We've got confidence. We've got a solid belief in the fact that God is going to carry us through. And if you haven't, then you need to get to know him better. Because this is a God that really does care about what happens in your life. This is a God that really cares about the things that are going on right now in your life. This is not somebody distant with his back turned to you and he has no idea what you're going through. No, this is a God that's right there with you. And we need to have confidence that come what may, God is going to see us through. When the Apostle Paul was in prison in Rome, he wasn't sure of the outcome of his state. He didn't know what the court would decide. And so he wrote to the Philippians and he made this statement. He says, whether I live or whether I die, I am the Lord's. I sort of like that statement. He said, I don't know what Caesar's going to do with me. He might let me go or he might put me to death. He said, I don't know. But I do know this, I am the Lord's. Do you know that this morning? Are you aware who you are? That you are the Lord's and he's watching over you. You see, Jesus was an optimist. Because another sign about optimists are that they believe in possibilities. They seldom accept the fact that life is a dead-end street with limited options. Jesus stood at the tomb of Lazarus one day, and they were weeping and crying because he had died. And Martha came to him and said, oh, Lord, if you only had been here, he wouldn't be dead today. But Jesus turned to her, and in the midst of all of that sorrow and grief and the darkness of the moment, he said to Martha, he said, Martha, your brother will rise again. He saw something that nobody else around the tomb was even thinking. They were all thinking, this is the end. He's gone. It's over. We'll never see our brother again. He said, no, Martha, there's a possibility here, and I want you to see it. The possibility is your brother will live again. Martha said, yeah, I kind of forgot that, Lord. I know in the last day he'll be raised up and so on. He said, no. You don't understand, Martha. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. In other words, right now, right at this moment, there's a possibility that your brother will live again. See, I don't think God ever closes the book on us and says, that's it, you're at the end, there's nothing beyond this point. If anyone always has a future, it's the Christian. I can't find anywhere in Scripture where it tells us that Christians never have a future. The next thing about an optimist is that an optimist is basically a person who expresses enthusiasm daily, hope and faith in what could be. You say, well, that's impossible. You can't do that every day. Is it really? Listen to what Jesus said on how to handle your worst day ever. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 and 12, he says, blessed, happy, to be envied and spiritually prosperous are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice, be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. Now, I don't know, but you're having a bad day when everybody around you is throwing insults at you, persecuting you, beating on you, and mocking you and reviling you and doing all kinds of nasty things to you. That's the worst day, I think, when that's happening. But Jesus said, no problem. Get your attention off the bad things and look over here. Here's something good happening. Great is your reward in heaven. You know, Job was having bad days. If you read the book of Job, you know he was having bad days. When the news came to him one after the other, a messenger brought him a story of something that he had lost on that day. But you know, you read the book of Job and it never ends on a sad note. It ends only on a positive note. Because I don't think it's God's style to leave his people in misery. Neither was it Jesus' style when he said, if you're having a bad day, don't worry about the bad day. Great is your reward in heaven. In short, an optimist is a positive person who exudes a godlike, creative energy. Second thing I think Joshua took through Canaan, and I want to hurry here with this, is he took with him the idea that his thoughts and subsequent decisions could change his destiny. If he grew fearful, he knew that he would transfer that fear to the people of Israel and that they would run instead of going in and possessing the land. And so he knew that he had to have the right thoughts and make the right decisions in order to have the right destiny. I never thought I'd be a preacher. And I thought that when I was in high school after I gave my grade 10 book report. How many know what it's like to be nervous in front of people? You ever have that sense in front of people? I like Seinfeld, He says, at a funeral, researchers have showed that most people have more of a fear of public speaking than a fear of death. And so Jerry Seinfeld said, that means that at a funeral, most people would rather be the corpse in the coffin than the person giving the eulogy. I kind of felt that way when I was in high school. Because I remember my grade 10 book report. I don't even remember the book now. That's what anxiety will do to you. Trauma can be so bad that it just wipes out most of your memories. But I do remember the symptoms of my trauma. And so I was standing in front of my grade 10 class to give my book report. And I had it written down on a piece of paper. That was my first mistake, having it on a piece of paper. Because as soon as I brought the paper up to read it, guess what the paper started doing? And I don't know why. I thought I had cerebral palsy. But it wasn't. It was just my nerves were acting up like crazy. So I thought, this is crazy. I can't even read it when it's doing this. So I brought it in closer to me like this. But it still rustled and rattled, and I could read it because it wasn't fluttering now in front of my eyes. But then as I got that under control, a second symptom hit me. And it was in my knees, and they started doing this. This is not a lie. This is the truth. This is my grade 10 book report. And I'm rattling my paper, and my knees are shaking like this. And just when I thought, this can't get any worse. Well, it could if I passed out, but I didn't pass out. My left eye started to flutter. So I'm rattling my paper, shaking my knees, and fluttering my eyes like this. I don't know how I got through the experience, but I managed to do it. I don't even know I should have got an A for effort because that was one massive effort. So now fast forward this from grade 10 just a little while into the future, and I'm part of a youth group at church. And your pastor was our youth leader at the time. I'm 16 years old. And he comes to me and he says, how would you like to speak to the youth next Friday night? I didn't even have to think about the answer. It was out of my mouth before he even finished his question. No, I can't speak. You know why I was saying that, don't you? I've got the memory of a grade 10 book report flashing through my mind like, a movie that's looping itself over and over and over and over again. I'm saying, no, I'm not going to speak. I said, I can't talk to people. And he looked at me for a moment. Now, I know your pastor is wise, but here's a little positive secret about him. There were times as a teenager that he was wise. Not all the time. I know him well enough that he did some crazy things too, but there was times when he was wise. And so when I said, I can't speak in front of people, I'd fall apart. He said, let me tell you something, or let me ask you something. He said, do you know all the people that come to youth group? I said, yeah, I do. I know them. They're friends. He said, have you ever talked to them as individuals before? I said, yeah, I have. He said, well, there's no difference then. He said, you're just going to talk to them all at once. He said, if you know them and you talk to them as individuals, then you can just stand up there and talk to them as a group because they're the same people. Now, how do you argue with logic like that? Maybe that was the problem in grade 10. I didn't know all my classmates well enough. I don't know. But that's why I never thought he would be a preacher. But God knew differently. You see, and here's the thing. The thoughts you have and the substitute decisions you make can change your destiny. So needless to say, I agreed to speak in youth group. And that was my first time ever to actually preach. And I'll put the quotations around it because really, I had 8 minutes and I talked about everything I knew in 8 minutes. When you worry, when you allow negativity to control your mind, it can create bad decisions. And bad decisions can help destroy a wonderful destiny. Be aware of that. The last thing I want to share with you that Joshua, I think, took into Canaan was you really can control your thoughts. You don't have to be dominated by them. You don't have to be led by them. You don't have to be controlled by them. You can choose your thoughts. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9, Paul said, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Think about such things. I liked Ronald Reagan when he was the president of the United States. You remember when he got shot and they took him to the hospital and he had the president laid out on a gurney in the hallway. Now, what would you be thinking if you were Ronald Reagan at that point? You just got shot by a potential assassin trying to take your life. You had a bullet lodged in your side, not far from your heart. It was life-threatening. It wasn't just a flesh wound, it was a serious injury. What would you be thinking about? Oh, I'm shot. It hurts. I'm going to die. But as he laid there on the gurney, his wife Nancy came up and he looked up at her and he saw the anxiety all over her face, as any wife would be if her husband was in that similar state. And as she looked down at him, he looked up at her. Now, this is what I mean about controlling your thoughts. As he looked up at her, this is what he said, honey, I forgot to duck. And as they wheeled him into the room, and he looked around the room, into the operating room, and he looked at all the doctors that were in there, ready to perform surgery to remove the bullet from him and to save his life. He saw the concern on their faces because they knew it was a serious wound. It was a delicate operation. And before they put him under with the anesthetic, he looked around and said to the doctors, I sure hope you're all Republicans. I don't know if I would have controlled my thoughts like that in that kind of a situation, but he did. And that's why I love so much about him. Such a great leader. He didn't let the trauma of the moment dictate and control his actions. And I think if he could do it in that state, we can do it in whatever state we find ourselves in. Let me leave you with 3 quick things to remember here. Number 1, there's always a living, intelligent, and compassionate God who's with you. Number 2, help can come from the most unlikely source. Don't be surprised where it comes from. It can come from the most unlikely source. You don't have to really have the solution sometimes. Sometimes it just comes. And number 3, you always have a future. Always have a future. And you always have something to look forward to. Would you stand with me? I shared this message with you today for one reason only, is because I need it. I needed it. As I look back over the events of this week and all the things that sort of went through my mind and the challenges I faced and the issues I've had to deal with and the anxiety that I experienced, I needed these words for myself. But I prayed as I came over here this morning. I said, God, I know I'm going to share this and it's meant for me, but I'm praying right now for anybody who's here, who's going to be there, who might need to hear this as well. I want you to go from this place this morning the way I'm going to go. I want you to go from this place with a greater confidence in God, with a greater sense of his presence, and with a lightness to your step, because you know you're not alone. And you know that nothing out there can really overwhelm you. You've got a defense. You've got a help. You've got someone who's on your side. I'm always amazed when I fly on rainy days and I get on the plane and it takes me up into the air and you pass through the clouds. I'm always amazed and a bit excited when I break through the other side of the cloud. Because you know what I see up there? I see the sun. When I'm on the ground, I didn't see it. All I saw was the dark clouds, felt the wet rain. But when I break through that barrier, the sun is always there. You know, and that's the way it is with God. Sometimes our problems, we get our attention on them, we fixate on them, we stew about them, we think about them, we analyze them, we try to sort them out. And it's like a cloud that is over our heads all the time. But we need to remember what happens out there. The sun is always shining. God is always there. You're never, ever alone. That's what I take with me this week. As I go into the next week, and I don't know what's ahead. I know what's behind, and some of it will continue into next week, but I know I'm not alone. And neither are you. Let's pray. Lord, today, let these people be encouraged through these words. Let their spirits be stronger. Let their faith rise. Let their lives be blessed with your presence. And Lord, in some small way this week, let each of us see the hand of your blessing upon our lives. Lord, by faith we know you're here. But just give us that little indication, that little breakthrough of sunlight that tells us the sun is always shining, that God is always there. Give us rest this week from our labors. Give us rest from our anxiety. Give us rest from our troubles. And teach us how to lean into you. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you. David asked me to just dismiss you in the name of the Lord. Have a wonderful week.